A number of years ago, I was listening to a lecture given by a theologian who was trying to explain what we're celebrating tonight, trying to explain the Incarnation, and he really was saying it's impossible. It's just the fact that the God of the universe became a human being, became an infant. How do you ever grasp that? So he was struggling to try and get us to have some sense of wonder. And then he said, maybe his 5-year-old niece explained it best. He was over at his sister's house on a Christmas Eve, and this little 5-year-old was quizzing him if he knew what Christmas was all about. And so she kept asking him if he knew who the baby was. And he thought, he's a smart theologian. The baby is Jesus. Yes, she said, but do you know who the baby was? And he said, well, the baby is Jesus. No, the baby, she said, was God. And then she, like a ballerina, spun around a number of times and dove under the pillows. And he said, that's really the only proper response. Is that we spin around a few times and dive under the pillows to understand this incredible thing. There are a number of maybe mysteries in human life. I was running errands on Monday, and my phone was giving me my podcasts in order, and the one that came up next was Radio Lab. I don't know if any of you listen to Radio Lab, but I'm listening to it, and this one was on altruism. Why human beings do things for the sake of a stranger or another person that has no benefit for themselves. So they were trying to figure that out, and the first part of the episode was on this very, very smart scientist whose name was Gary, but I forgot his last name now, I think. But anyway, you don't need to know. You can look it up on Radio Lab. But he was trying to come up with a formula that would explain how it has to do with evolution. That human beings do good things for other human beings because it helps the human race, or the species continues. We're just like animals, and so he came up with a formula that resolved it. Yes, we do it simply because it helps the human species. But then he was so troubled by that he spent the rest of his life trying to prove that wrong. That just can't be, because people on a regular basis do amazing things. And then they went to interview the Carnegie Hero Fund people, which I had never heard of before. But Carnegie started it in 1904 with all his money, and they give an award each year to people who do amazing, heroic things just because they do. They didn't want police officers or firemen or military, but just civilians who give their lives for the sake of another, or who rescue people. So far, they've given out over 10,000 of them, and they interviewed 3. One young woman was driving along a country road, typical Nebraska gravel road, and she looks into a field, and there is a bull that is mauling this lady, just throwing her up in the air with its horns, and she thought, oh, that's terrible. So she gets out of her car and goes over to the fence. It's an electric fence, but she decides she needs to rescue this lady. So she takes a piece of metal pipe she found there in the ditch and ran over there and just starts pounding the bull on the head until the bull went away and she saved this lady. And they asked her, why did you do that? I don't know, it just needed to be done. That lady was going to get killed. I had to go get her. The second person they interviewed was a guy who was woken up in the middle of the night by the sound of a big crash. He looks out the window, there's a car that has hit the tree in front of his house and is on fire. So he goes running out there just with his sweatpants on, and there are 3 teenagers in the car. And so he gets them out. In the meantime, he's getting burned, getting them out of the car. They asked him, "Why did you do that?" And he said, "Well, I just thought about my kids. And I thought, if my kids were in that car, I would want somebody to pull them out. So I pulled them out." The third one was a guy in New York who was at the subway station with his 2 daughters, 4 years old and 7-year-old. And the guy next to him has a seizure, falls in front of the subway train coming toward them. So that he can see the train coming. He sees this guy laying on the tracks. The guy is clearly out. He's had a seizure. He's not getting up. So he jumps down there and tries to get the guy up before the train comes. The train keeps coming. He can't on his own get this guy lifted up. So he straightens the guy out on the track, and then he lays on top of the guy, and the subway train goes over them. And he felt the train, but he wasn't hurt by it. The train stops. And of course, his daughters are screaming, and all the people there on the stands are screaming, so he peeked his head out from under the subway. "We're all right." So they got him out. And so, "Why did you do that?" they asked him. He said, "I don't know, I just heard a voice that said, you can do this. So I did." They continue on with the podcast. Never once, of course this is typical of our world, never once did they mention God anywhere in the podcast. Never did they mention love anywhere in the podcast. And so they end the podcast with saying, "We don't know why human beings do this." And I think, well, you know, it all started back a long time ago when God took on our human flesh. Why did God do that? But once he does, it changes us. When God becomes a human being, you and I are not the same anymore. Human beings are forever different. You, my friends, have a part of God in you. And the part of God in you does crazy things like saving lives, like giving of themselves, like being generous. All of you have been probably doing crazy the last week or two, trying to get ready for this celebration. Giving of yourselves for the sake of others, with no expectation of return. A total free gift. Because that's the God part of us. That's the love part of us that says, this other person is important to me as I am. And so I do these things. Not because it feels good, not because I'm going to feel good afterwards, but because that's what love does. We celebrate the birth of love tonight. God, who is love, comes to earth. And if we're sitting here, we cannot be the same, because that part of God is transforming us little by little, day by day, throughout our lives, making us more and more like him, more and more like love. And that love brings us into an everlasting glory. So, my friends, we celebrate. And you can get up and spin around and dive under the pews if you'd like, because that might be the only appropriate response.